From Hollywood, this is Kasem. Well, now we're up to the first hit for the group Third Eye Blind, a band who expected the worst when they opened for Oasis last year. Instead, they were called back for an encore. It was last year that the San Francisco group called Third Eye Blind got their big break. They were offered the opening slot during a Bay Area appearance by the British band Oasis. But along with the offer came a warning. They were told, quote, "The Oasis crowd is really fanatical. You guys don't have to keep going. You can walk off the stage at any time if you don't feel right." They were warned that the Oasis fans would probably throw things at them, that they'd be booed and hissed. But Third Eye Blind wasn't afraid. They knew they had something special. They say that for their first two songs, they were pelted with empty soda cans and bags of candy. But then something remarkable happened. The Oasis crowd stopped acting up and started listening. By the third song, the audience was getting into it. And by the fourth song, they were crowd surfing and slam dancing. And when Third Eye Blind finished its set, the unbelievable happened. They were called back for an encore. The show's promoter was so happy with the opening act's success, they even paid them double their agreed-upon fee. And that never happens. This week, the band that won over a tough crowd in San Francisco jumped 6 notches to number 26 on Casey's Top 40. Here's Third Eye Blind with Semi-Charmed Life.
Casey's Top 40.
I'm David Perry, sitting in for Casey Kasem, and we're counting down the 40 biggest hits in the 50 states. Now we're up to the number 1 song in the USA on Casey's Top 40, a smash by a band who works so hard when they're at home in San Francisco, they say going on tour for them is like a vacation. The problem is that this 4-man band doesn't just make music for themselves. They're so plugged into the San Francisco new music scene that they've become the godfather of rock to bands all over the Bay Area. They're constantly writing songs for up-and-coming bands, producing their demos, helping them with their stage act. Singer Stephan Jenkins says their relentless at-home schedule has taken a lot out of the band members. He says, quote, "It's been a lot of stress, and I know I'm not handling it very well." But he says luckily there is an out. For most bands, going on tour is an exhausting experience. But for this quartet, it's a way to get away from their many projects. He says, quote, "We're looking forward to going on tour. It'll be like a vacation. The tour manager tells us where we need to be, we show up there, and that's that." All that's left for the band to do then is play their music, including their debut single that's taken them all the way to the top of the charts and become the biggest hit in the land. The number 1 song in the USA on Casey's Top 40 for the 3rd week in a row is Semi-Charmed Life by Third Eye Blind.
Casey's Top 40.
And that means we're up to the number 1 song in the USA on Casey's Top 40. It's by a band whose members say success has been a long time coming, a fact they were reminded of recently when they met a 60-year-old punk rocker. It was earlier this year when this 4-man band was returning home to San Francisco after a successful tour. To celebrate their hard work, their record company arranged for a limousine to meet them at the airport. And as they were riding along on the highway, they struck up a conversation with the driver. During their conversation, the driver looked in the rearview mirror and said, "I was once a punk rocker." Lead singer Stephan Jenkins says for a moment he thought the guy was nuts. He just couldn't picture this conservative-looking man who had to be at least 60 years old wearing spiked hair and a leather jacket. But the driver went on to explain that he once owned a club called Mabuhay in San Francisco's North Beach. And it turned out all 4 members of this band had played at Mabuhay during the mid-'80s when they were teenagers. And suddenly, what was supposed to be a quick ride home from the airport became a long trip down memory lane for the 2 generations of rockers. And as bass player Ariane Salazar points out, it reminded this group of just how far they've come, from teenage rockers in the 80s to pop stars in the 90s. Because for the 5th week in a row, they have the biggest hit in the land.
Casey's Top 40.
And that means we're up to the number 1 song in the USA on Casey's Top 40, a smash by a band whose lead singer is new to the world of singing. In his last band, he wasn't the lead singer, he was the lead talker. His name is Stephan Jenkins, and like all the members of his group, he came up through San Francisco's complex world of alternative music, which in his case wasn't just alternative, it was right on the edge. He says the last act he was in was called Puck and Zen, and it wasn't so much a musical act as a musical concept. Stephan Jenkins describes it as, quote, an acoustic hip-hop thing, which boiled down to a sound mixer sampling records and doing all sorts of rap sound effects behind Stephan while he stood at a microphone and talked. What did he talk about? Well, it was a stream of consciousness type of thing, where he just talked about whatever came into his mind. For him, it was an attempt to combine the old beatnik poetry readings of the 50s with the rap and hip-hop style of the 90s. It was an interesting experiment. But when Stephan got the chance to actually do some real singing with a real band, he bid farewell to Puck and Zen and said hello to the group that for the 6th week in a row has the biggest hit in the land.
Casey's Top 40.
I'm David Perry for Casey Kasem. Casey's Top 40 originates in Hollywood. Now we're up to Semi-Charmed Life. It's by a band whose leader says that these days we're in a spiritual crisis, and he gave his band a name that warns people that we're growing blind to the spiritual world. His name is Stephan Jenkins, and he's always had a deeply spiritual side to him. Throughout his life, he's read everything he could on the worlds of magic and dreams, and he says he's come to believe it's all true, especially the notion that there are worlds within worlds, past lives and universes parallel to our own. He's a big believer in meditation as a way of getting to those worlds, especially those that open up something mystics have long believed in, the third eye from which the soul can see into the past, the future, and into other realities as well. But Stephan Jenkins says as far as he can tell, this isn't a subject that people are as interested in the 90s as they were in the 60s. To him, it seems that people are more interested in material things than in spiritual things. And it's that notion that inspired him to give his band a name that warns of the danger of closing that third eye to the worlds of magic and dreams. Now falling a notch to number 6 on Casey's Top 40, here's Third Eye Blind with their recent number 1, Semi-Charmed Life.
Casey counts them down. Casey's Top 40.
I'm Casey Kasem on Casey's Top 40. Well, now we're up to the latest hit for Third Eye Blind, a group whose first hit, Semi-Charmed Life, was about drug addiction. Yet the member who wrote it doesn't use drugs of any kind, doesn't smoke, and is a vegan. He's lead singer Stephan Jenkins, and as he said many times, their former number 1 hit is about the drug called crystal meth, a powerful form of speed. And the lyrics are so raw and descriptive that you might think that the person who wrote and sings the song was writing from experience. But Stephan says, actually, he's never tried the drug. He's never tried any drug. He says, quote, I lead a healthy life. So he has to work from the experience of others. What he knows about speed is what people have told him about speed, not what he's gone through himself. And that's just part of the healthy life he tries to live. You see, Stephan has long been a vegetarian. In fact, he's a vegan. That means he doesn't eat animal products at all of any kind. No meat, no fish, no poultry, or dairy products. He says his job as a songwriter is to observe things and boil them down to their essence. That isn't something he's able to do if his perception is clouded by any sort of stimulant. This week, you can hear Stephan's clear-headed observations on his band's latest hit, the song that climbs 2 notches to number 30 on Casey's Top 40, Third Eye Blind with How's It Going to Be?
Casey's Top 40.
I'm Casey Kasem. Now we're up to the latest hit for Third Eye Blind. While performing on stage, the band's leader got knocked down. But he got up again and proved the show must go on. It happened this past December while the members of Third Eye Blind were warming up for a big TV special. The plan was to tape one of their performances to be included on a New Year's Eve broadcast. And while the air date was still several weeks away, Third Eye Blind was on a strict deadline since they were in the midst of a tour. Well, the 4 musicians were on stage running through the song they were going to play. And as usual, singer Stephan Jenkins was putting 110% into his performance. He says he got lost in the song, moving around the stage as if there were an actual audience watching. In the process, he completely lost track of where he was going. And before anyone could stop him, Stephan tripped and tumbled headfirst off the stage, landing on the concrete floor below. Band members say it was a nasty fall. They quickly rushed to help the singer and found him knocked out cold. Paramedics were called, and after several frantic minutes, Stephan was eventually revived. The singer says he was slightly shaken, but not once did he consider canceling the performance. And true to the old showbiz adage, the show must and did go on. This week, a fully recovered and very lucky Stephan Jenkins is singing survey song number 15 on Casey's Top 40. Here's Third Eye Blind with How's It Gonna Be?
Casey's Top 40.
Now we're up to Third Eye Blind, a group that took the fast lane to stardom in 1997. In just a few short months, they went from paying their dues in small clubs to flying in style on a private jet. Barely a year ago, few people outside the San Francisco Bay Area had ever heard of Third Eye Blind. While they had a strong following in their hometown, the band was lucky if they could get a gig anywhere else. But ever since the release of their self-titled debut album last April, Third Eye Blind's rise has been truly meteoric. They got their first big boost when Oasis came to town and invited the band to open a show in front of 8,000 people. Next, their record company sent them to Japan, where they played for several thousand music fans at a festival on Mount Fuji. By that time, word of mouth had spread in the USA, and their song, Semi-Charmed Life, was on its way to number 1. Then, in September, Third Eye Blind got invitations from both U2 and the Rolling Stones to open several shows on their respective stadium tours. And suddenly, this up-and-coming band was living large. Stephan says during their gigs with U2, Bono would often drop by the band's dressing room just to hang out. Once he even invited them to fly on U2's private jet. Well, earlier this month, Third Eye Blind's speedy rise continued as they launched their first major headlining tour. And this week, a song they're performing on tour is survey song number 14 on Casey's Top 40.
Counting down the hits with Casey Kasem.
Well, now, Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, used to have a ring with the letters TCB on it, taking care of business. Well, now we're up to Third Eye Blind, a band who say the initials that guide them are DIY. The king actually had his initials TCB all around him. He even used them as the names of several of his businesses. He always said that that was what he was all about. He was taking care of business with his music and his life. The band called Third Eye Blind are also taking care of business. But more importantly for them is the notion of DIY. That's do it yourself. Lead singer Stephan Jenkins says, you hear a lot of artists talking about those initials, but we live by them. We were never a part of the San Francisco scene. We've always created our own world. We think by ourselves. Everything is done by us. Our own posters, our own album covers, our own production. And he goes on to say, DIY is very important to us. If people disagree with us, our response is simple. This is how we do it. And by doing it their way, they've managed to cut their own road through the world of rock. A road created with DIY do-it-yourself hits, like the one that's at number 19 in our survey.
American Top 40.
Well, now we're up to the latest hit for a band who worked out of an old warehouse in San Francisco's Chinatown. They say the atmosphere inspires them, and they can always get some chow mein at 4 in the morning. San Francisco's Chinatown is the oldest in America, dating all the way back to the gold rush in 1849. It's a part of town that's easy to get lost in, with its many narrow alleyways and steep hills. And it's in the loft of an old warehouse in the heart of Chinatown that Third Eye Blind makes its music. Band members say they love being in old Chinatown. It's as if 150 years of ghosts and spirits are there, filling the streets with moody melancholy. But they also love being in Chinatown for a lot of practical purposes. You see, the area is close to North Beach, where a lot of the rock clubs they hang out at are located. In many cases, they can walk from their warehouse to a club date. And when they're working late, there's no place better than Chinatown. Many of the restaurants are open all night long, especially the inexpensive noodle places where they can go for big plates of chow mein, lo mein, and chow fun noodles. Late night food that keeps them well fueled so they can come up with songs like the one that moves up a notch to number 23 in our countdown this week. Here's Third Eye Blind with Jumper.
I wish you would step back from that ledge, my friend. This is Ed McMann for Kasem on American Top 40. And currently traveling the USA on a tour they've dubbed the Dragons and Astronauts Tour is Third Eye Blind. Singer Stephan Jenkins says, quote, "The name Dragons and Astronauts appropriately defines our time. Even with technology, the endless fascination with being wired and plugged in, people still go through their lives with their fingers crossed. Everyone still looks for dragons in the stars." Unquote. Here's Third Eye Blind climbing to number 6 with Never Let You Go.
The hits from coast to coast.
Well, now we're up to the song called Never Let You Go. It's by a band from San Francisco who had a lot of record company interest, till they told the companies the rules they had to follow if they signed them. It wasn't that long ago that record companies were lining up to offer a deal to this four-man band from the Bay Area. They had a sound that was all their own, and a lot of A&R guys felt that they had what it took to go all the way. Or at least they felt that way until the group explained how it was going to be, which was simple. The band's lead singer, Stephan Jenkins, says, quote, "We told the record companies, don't tell us what to do. We're going to make the record we want to make," unquote. Which made this band sound like a loose cannon, an accident waiting to happen. At that point, most of the companies passed on them, but Sylvia Rohn, head of Elektra Records, liked that kind of spirit. She said no problem, and so this band signed with her. This week, the band with the unshakable belief in themselves has survey song number 4 on American Top 40. Here's Third Eye Blind with Never Let You Go. Well, now we're up to the hit song Deep Inside of You, the latest hit for a band who say they took a vow of poverty in their early years. They lived as modestly as they could, so nothing could get in the way of their music. Back in the mid-90s, the band called Third Eye Blind was trying to get their sound together and get recognized. To keep costs down, they lived in a communal apartment in the Haight-Ashbury section of San Francisco, which they shared, in the words of leader Stephan Jenkins, with a bunch of people. During the day, the band members worked in coffee shops and restaurants. They did whatever they could to make enough money to live. But they also took jobs that didn't keep them from rehearsing and from playing whatever clubs they could at night. As Stephen says, it was a time when we took a vow of poverty in order to go after what we wanted. And a couple of years later, they reached their goal when they scored a record contract and their first hit. This week the band has survey song number 29 on American Top 40. Here's Third Eye Blind with Deep Inside of You.
American Top 40.
Well, now we're up to an American Top 40 Extra by Third Eye Blind, a band whose lead singer is trying a new role as a leading man in a Hollywood movie. His name is Stephan Jenkins, and as the lead singer of the San Francisco band Third Eye Blind, he's been the voice of big hits like Semi-Charmed Life and Never Let You Go. Third Eye Blind still exists, and Stephan Jenkins is still the band's lead singer, but he's also exploring his options as an actor. He appeared last year in the film Rockstar, and he recently finished filming a picture titled Art of Revenge. In the film, Stephan stars as Matt, an ambitious designer whose wife has stuck with him through some hard times. But as soon as Matt finds fame, he leaves her for a string of younger women. He dumps her, just like that. She decides to follow the old saying, don't get mad, get even. And to do that, she hires a young woman and they work out a plan to destroy the husband who walked out on her. Stephan gets to play a bad guy, and early word is he's very good at it. The film is due out this fall. Now, with an American Top 40 Extra, here's singer and actor Stephan Jenkins and his band Third Eye Blind with a Top 5 smash from 1997, Semi-Charmed Life. You're listening to our weekly countdown of the hottest hits in the land. Well, now we're up to an American Top 20 Extra by Third Eye Blind, a group whose leader says his band have only 2 things in common. Luckily, one of them is their music. Not long ago, lead singer Stephan Jenkins was talking about how long it takes the band to record their songs. He explained that, quote, I work on each line till it's perfect. but they never seem to be perfect. And then he admitted that everyone in the band is a bit obsessive in their habits. Quote, "You have to understand that Third Eye Blind is made up of 4 of the weirdest people I've ever met, and that includes me." Stephen says that most of the time no one in the band knows what he's talking about. Quote, "Sometimes I'm not even sure what I'm talking about." And when it comes to the other 3 members of Third Eye Blind, quote, "Our guitar player collects things. I don't think he throws anything away. Our bass player goes weeks without speaking to anyone. And our drummer tells us he's Secret Agent 000. Stephen says we really have nothing in common except that we're crazy, and we all make music. Now, with an American Top 20 Extra, here's some of that music. With a smash from 1997, here's Third Eye Blind with Semi-Charmed Life.
Casey's Coast to Coast.